You're listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Now, it is time to break it down.
Welcome to episode number 40 of the Sonny Brown Breakdown. I'm your host, Sonny Brown, and in this episode, I talk to the OG of no-gi, Chris Brennan. Chris is a MMA Hall of Famer and three-time world no-gi jiu-jitsu champion, but perhaps he might not be as well known for actually starting the first no-gi jiu-jitsu school in America back in 1998 after leaving the Gracie Academy. We discuss what the Gracie Academy was like at the time and what caused him to change to no-gi, and also how we learned to train his own students while competing at a high level in mixed martial arts all around the world. We also discuss then how he took those lessons and is now passing them on to his own sons with their MMA and grappling careers. We also get into some stories about what it was like in Pride. In particular, there's talk of a potential fixed fight in the backstage locker room area that's incredible, and also the time that Genki Sudo came to his gym and competed in a submission grappling tournament, which if you've ever seen a Genki Sudo highlight at a grappling tournament online, you probably know the video I'm talking about. So it was a fascinating discussion. Just really tried to focus in on that element of no-gi and starting no-gi and no-gi jiu-jitsu, as I found that very interesting just to get his perspective of. But of course, his MMA career is so storied that I'd love to have him back on again just to delve into all those fight stories as well. So I really enjoyed the conversation. Hope you do too. If you are feeling generous, you can leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, or if you want to give us any feedback, the email is sunnybrown@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram, pretty active, and which is Sonny Brown Breakdown, or Facebook or Twitter as well. And with that, let's go to the podcast. Chris, how are you today, mate?
Awesome, man. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for joining me, and it is an honor to have such a veteran of both Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA to be able to talk to. Competing in all the top organizations, UFC, Pride, Shooto, Cage Rage, King of the Cage, where you were the championship, and fighting the best guys in those organizations as well. Along with, competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with the No-Gi Black Belt World Championships. And then, what I really want to get into is the creation of your own gym, which was the first no-gi grappling school in America. So I actually didn't know that initially. I might assume that many others would, when they think no-gi grappling in America, they go to Eddie Bravo.
Sure.
But we had a mutual friend in Dennis Kelly who lived and trained with you, and
yep.
He let me know, and I was fascinated to learn that. So I just want to go back to the start with you. With you obviously watching UFC 1 while you were bouncing, I do believe, with Chemo and Todd Medina, early UFC vets as well.
Yeah.
And that would have, I guess, led you to the Gracie school. And what was it like those first, that first day going in there? How did that experience unfold?
It was cool. I actually went to another guy first, trained with Ken Gabrielson in his garage.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found Hoist. I didn't know Hoist was in the area. I just watched the first UFC and didn't know he was in the area. Found out he was in the area, and I went, directly there. Kind of wanted to go to the source at the time. I trained there for a little bit, and then I actually sold my car, packed 4 duffel bags, and flew to Brazil. And I had 10 grand, and I expected to stay, for a month and a half, whatever, take as many privates as I could and train and eat. Well, $1 was 7 real at the time. So I basically had 70 grand. So I stayed for a year and
nice.
took lots and lots of privates, trained every day, multiple times a day. And I got good. But when I came home is when I really got good. The following year, kind of everything I had learned over that year was I'd learned so much, and just kind of was overloaded and took notes and videos and lots of stuff. And then I brought a friend back with me who came back just a short time after I did and I trained with him in my garage in California for, a year and a half. And that was kind of the real growth spot for me. I went back to the Gracie Academy and trained, but, I was a blue belt at the Gracie Academy. They taught at you want me to jump into the Gracie Academy thing already or not yet?
Yeah,
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. So when you went to Brazil, was that you hadn't gone to the Gracie Academy yet? Is that?
Yeah, I had gone there for a short time, and I really wanted to fight. My goal was to fight, and I already got the vibe from Horian at the time that Hoist was going to be the only fighter in the building.
Sure.
And I liked Hoist. Me and him vibed really well from the very beginning, and I was like one of the only guys with balls in the class that would be like, who hit you the hardest? Who was the toughest fight? I'd had all the questions that no one wanted to ask him. And it was cool. But yeah, so I was there for a short time, and then I went to Brazil. I trained at Alliance, which was Master Jiu-Jitsu at the time, Ďʀʀᴏ Romero Cavalcante. And I trained at his gym, and man, Leo Vieira was a brown belt. Comprido was a purple belt. Ricardo Vieira was a yellow belt. Fabio Gurgel was there still in Rio. It hadn't gone to Sao Paulo yet, which is where Marcelo started with him. Like, it was way before everything. And just had an awesome experience. Me and Leo Vieira were like every day trained together, and my buddy Roger Brooking, who was the guy that I brought back with me, who was a brown belt. Just had a lot of really cool experiences down there.
Okay. And then going back from, spending that year in the Brazil, heading back to the USA, then I guess going back to the Gracie Academy, what were the kind of, differences in how jiu-jitsu was being taught to the students at the time?
Oh, it was so super different. It was the Gracies taught, they would teach you one way for a certain amount of time. And then for example, they would teach you how to pass the guard by putting your hand on the bicep on one side and reaching your hand between the legs on the other, and then stacking them and passing. But there was no such thing as a triangle yet, because they hadn't taught you that. So you're doing that for months, and then you move on to the intermediate class, and you don't want to pass that way anymore because of the triangle. You need to do it like this. So basically just created 6 months of bad habits that you now have to break, and so I love teaching anything. Like I used to teach my brothers how to tie their shoes, how to ride a bike. I enjoy teaching. So as someone who enjoyed teaching, right off the bat, I'm like, no, this is wrong. Like you shouldn't have to teach anything and then unteach it to teach it a different way. And that's what they did. It was just a money-making, long process thing. And after a little bit, it got exposed. I was actually gone. I left the Gracie Academy. So to go back just a little bit, I'm training there. I'm going through the instructor program. Me and Mark Lehman live in a hotel room together. We lived at a Days Inn, and we took all the furniture out, matted the living room, and just trained there every day. But we were also in the instructor program at the academy. So we're paying $600 a month to be in this program where we have to be there basically 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. with a break in the middle, and clean the toilets, clean the showers, clean the mats, assist in all the classes. And it was just like, it was good. It was good for me because I had been coming from a kind of a very undisciplined background, I was a jackass as a kid. So it was good for me discipline wise, for sure. The problem was we weren't getting the reciprocation. They weren't teaching us the way we should have been getting taught. So my goal from day one was to fight, right? I saw the UFC, I wanted to fight. So I went to learn jiu-jitsu to fight. And I end up getting a fight with Pat Miletich. I had a couple of small fights in between, but I end up getting booked to fight Pat Miletich in Battlecade Extreme Fighting. And that was like John Peretti's baby. And so that ended up folding, and the fight didn't happen. And then Monty Cox, who's Pat's manager, hit me up and said, "Hey, would you like to fight Pat in our event, Extreme Challenge?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I get booked a fight with Pat, and Horian calls me in his office one day and says, "Hey, I heard you have a fight coming up." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah, you can't fight and be out of here." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, is our name on anything? Are they advertising you as a fighter out of here?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "Do they know you train here?" And I said, I'm pretty sure they do. I mean, I'm really the only person that fights or that wants to fight and out of the gym. So I'm sure they know where I train, but that's all. And he says, "Well, I need to see a copy of the contract." And I was like, "Man, I don't even have a contract." Like, it was a small, back then it was a small organization. And he may have sent me a paper one day to sign, but at that point I hadn't had it yet. So he's concerned that they're building me up as a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter. Well, long story short, I come back to him and I was like, "Listen, I don't have this. They're not building me as this, but I'm gonna fight, right? That's my goal in the first place. And we can do challenge matches here in the gym for you, but I can't make money fighting out there, for myself." And his answer was basically no. So me, Mark Lehman, Lowell Anderson, Ethan Milius, and I believe my friend Richard Bressler also came. And then a guy, Avi. Avi is a Jewish guy who's got a shitload of money. And he was training at the Gracie Academy. He said, "Let's go open a gym together." And I was like, "Seriously?" We literally left the Gracie Academy and drove to Beverly Hills, and he found a building and we opened Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu. But where my motivation came is on the way out the door, I'm having a conversation with a guy named Sam Rand, who was the manager of the Gracie Academy. And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, at some point I'm going to open up a gym." And he goes, "Ha ha ha, Chris Brennan Jiu-Jitsu, fuck me, who's going to come?" And I said, "Well, we'll find out." And when I left there, man, that was all I ever needed. I needed someone to tell me I couldn't do it, so that I could. And that was the end of it for me. I didn't put a gi on from blue belt on. I only trained at Beverly Hills for a little while. And then I kind of bounced around. Hickson had a guy down in Laguna Niguel where my parents lived named Mark Eckert and Dave Kama. They were both phenomenal. And I trained with them off and on. And then finally I started teaching out of my garage because at the time I was a blue belt. I was a good blue belt and I was teaching no-gi, which is what I wanted to do. And I really studied the last few months that I was at the Gracie Academy. I really studied how they taught. And they taught really well. They taught their techniques, the details very well. They just didn't teach you a lot, So it was hard, but I got a lot of the attention to detail down really well. Horian was a good teacher. He's an attorney, so he speaks really well.
Sure.
So I ended up teaching out of my garage, and I grew to like 30 or 40 students. I opened a gym and I got my first fight in the UFC. I fought in the UFC. Actually, sorry, I got my first fight in the UFC training out of my garage.
Wow.
And then I fought in the UFC. I took the money that I got and came home and opened my gym. And then that gym lasted about 8 or 9 months and it closed because I was like way ahead of the time. I didn't have Joe Rogan on TV talking about me and my jiu-jitsu. So I went back to my garage, built up to about 60 students, moved into another building. And from that point, it's just been phenomenal since 98, beginning of 98.
Yeah. So like an amazing time around that time with so much going on. And then when you have, started teaching the students coming through the door at your new place, like obviously you've said the attention to detail as a way of that the great at Gracie Academy that they were very good at. Was there any other things that you could see the benefit in, or just like things that they were doing that you really liked in terms of potentially like student retention, business wise, things like that of how they were running things?
I mean, they obviously killed it business wise. They had, they had a ton of students at the time. Hoist was fighting in the UFC. Everyone wanted to be the skinny guy that was beating all the big guys in the UFC. So that was basically their business card, right? Like that's why they used hoist in the first place. And as far as student retention goes, in my opinion, it worked for a little while. Just having it was the most effective, style. But then you have guys like Machado right down the road who are teaching and producing better guys. Okay. And then Horian brought in Kaiki, and Kaiki was an awesome teacher, and he was showing all the good stuff. And Horian would literally come in and tell him he couldn't show that, and he would get basically lectured for showing that. So shortly after the time we all left, he left and started doing his own thing. They end up, and I don't know how the Gracies got talked into this, because they had to have known how they were teaching, but they did a Machado versus Gracie school tournament, and the Gracies got their asses kicked. Right, the students of the Gracie Academy got their asses kicked, and it was, there were a handful of good guys. You're going to get good at jiu-jitsu if you train jiu-jitsu, but there were much more, a much higher percentage of high-level grappler at the Machado gym at that time. So, and then Kaiki did the same thing. When Kaiki left, a lot of the high-level students left with him.
Okay, so do you think it was then like kind of the drip feeding of techniques that they were doing to potentially keep people interested or keep them always wanting to see what the next one might be, as opposed to, I assume then the Machados were just showing, all the latest stuff, maybe, for lack of a better term, or just showing more things? Do you think that's what was causing the difference there?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I don't know what there was that was the latest or the or whatever. There wasn't a lot of evolution for a handful of years, to be honest. Yeah, sure. And there really didn't need to be evolution to us, because they had been doing it so long. There was already so much to show us. They were just doing it at such a slow pace that it really started to hinder people, and people wanted to compete, and they didn't even like you to compete outside the gym. You can only do in-house tournaments, and I can tell you why, because they weren't going to do very good. And so, yeah, I mean, teaching slow is one thing, but holding back techniques, and giving it one way and then having to change it to another way and things like that is just, that's not good. And I don't think it's good for business either. And I don't know that they changed that ever. Hopefully they did, but I opened my gym, and I didn't have a coach. I didn't watch instructionals. I knew I didn't want to put the gi on, and I knew no one else was training jiu-jitsu without the gi, full time, teaching for the full time. So I literally got my students, Jeremy Williams, Tracy Hess, this kid, Eric Victor, and I trained these guys as good and as fast as I possibly could to create training partners for myself. And, to get them, I showed everything at the highest level that I knew at the time, and just continued to evolve that way and evolve that way and evolve that way, and continue to get better and better. And my style, in my opinion, got to be so good because it was basically trial by error, trial by fire. I would train it, I would fight, and what worked, I would keep and develop more, and what didn't, I wouldn't. And so that just, I end up with some losses because of it, but I also end up with some really high quality, really good wins, and with really cool submissions. And in 20, I think in 21 wins, I got 19 submissions and 18 of them in the first round. So it's
pretty good.
It showed my style. That's what I wanted to do. But, I found out what worked and what didn't by actually trying it in the cage. So,
well, that's it. There's, there's no substitute for getting that real experience and putting it all on the line. And I imagine, though, there must have been a lot of pushback when you said you were going to do no-gi and do a no-gi only school. I mean, the common one that we still hear today is that, training in the gi makes you no-gi better. But that's, I say we still hear it today, but it's pretty much been been disproven now over time with the no-gi guys.
Sure.
What was that like, the scrutiny on you from the community for taking the gi off?
I was blackballed for a long time. No one wanted to promote me. No one wanted to let me train there unless I trained in the gi. No one wanted to, I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu, and then I'm beating guys, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm sure you would like to take the credit for my win by submission using jiu-jitsu, even though you don't want to call it jiu-jitsu. And I was a blue belt for four years, but I was like hitting helicopter arm bars on Fabiano Iha in Marco Huas's garage, as a blue belt. But no one was going to be the guy to promote me until I got, unless I put the gi on. And that's where Frangina came in and helped me out. And he was somebody that I met in Brazil who ended up being back in the United States with Paragon. And, from that point on, he's promoted me. He's put all the stripes and stuff on my black belt and everything. But for the longest time, I couldn't get anything promotion wise. I couldn't get, all the way, literally maybe 3 years ago, my kids are competing in a tournament and they're destroying other kids. And this dude, Alex Martin, who has a gym here in Dallas, says, man, they're so technical. Who teaches them jiu-jitsu? And I looked at him, I was like, what? And he goes, who teaches the jiu-jitsu at your gym? And I said, I do. And he goes, you train gi? And I said, no. He goes, yeah, well, who trains their gi? I said, they've never put a gi on before. And he said, how'd they get so technical? And I said, because it's a myth, bro. You don't have to put the gi on to get good at jiu-jitsu. And he was just like, huh. And I think he was like just trying to punk me by saying it. Like I knew he knew I didn't train gi. I knew he knew I was the coach. But, I never got the credit for anything. My third Worlds, I'm in the finals of Worlds, the third year. And I got a guy, Paulo Guilherme, who's a fifth degree from Saulo, and he's in the finals. And I had won the first 2 years, and he shows up to finals day. And he says, hey man, thanks for showing up. And I go, what? And he goes, thanks for showing up. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, I wasn't sure if you'd be here. And I was like, why wouldn't I be here? I won the last 2 years in a row. And he goes, I don't know. Thanks. So I beat him. And he's standing there at the podium. He goes, man, I really underestimated you. I didn't think you're that good. And I said, well, I didn't underestimate you. I knew you were good. And that's why I was prepared. And, but it's just 3 years in a row, won every match, but won by submission. And it doesn't matter. 21 subs, or 19 subs in MMA just never got the credit for. But I didn't blow it up, right? Like I didn't try to promote it too crazy. I just wanted to promote my gym and train and build good guys, and that's it's what I did. So I wasn't butthurt about it. I do speak up sometimes when they talk about Eddie being the first, because he definitely wasn't that. And I tried to get a match with him, to be honest, right after his last match with Hoyler, and it was declined. But I think I approached it too aggressively. Well, Eddie's good, right? He's very good. He's very good at his stuff. Stylistically, I am a terrible matchup for him. The way I pass, his go-to position from the bottom is my go-to position to kill people from the top. So I just wanted it. So I messaged Halleck, who was matchmaking for Metamoris. And I said, hey, set up a match with me and Eddie. I said, promote it as the original no-gi guy versus the guy that gets credit for being the original no-gi guy.
Yeah.
And I said, if I don't tap him in 5 minutes, he can have whatever it is you're going to pay me. And you don't even have to tell me what that is, but whatever my purse is, he can have it if I don't catch him in 5 minutes. And he was so excited. He goes, I'll get back to you. And he comes back to me and he goes, yeah, he's not going to compete anymore, he said. And I was like, man, I probably shouldn't have approached it like that. But, I don't dislike Eddie. He's a nice guy. He's respectful to me. He talks, at least as far as I know, highly of me. He commentated a lot of my fights and talked highly of me. He's got my name on his board in his gym that has submissions and positions and stuff, and he's got something on there called the Brennan mount,
Nice.
which is a tricky little mount that I do. So it's nothing against him. I just, and also he has, now that in the position we're in, he has way more to lose than I do. You know, if we compete and he beats me, everyone's like, okay, cool, whatever. But if I beat him, what I've been saying is true, right? So I get it. It is what it is. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, he obviously went through a lot of the same criticisms that you went through for doing no gi, particularly like the idea that the myth that you have to train in the gi if you want to get technical. I was wondering if maybe you could expand on that just a little bit, of like why you think that is a myth, and how if someone's thinking it still is the case, how they can look at it technically to dispel it.
So I think it started obviously with jiu-jitsu in Brazil was all gi. Then there was the 꽞ᴏᴏᴅᴏ guys, and they were doing some sort of jiu-jitsu submission wrestling without the gi on, you know, but they were more strikers with some submissions, and they had such a rivalry going that jiu-jitsu was it was the winner. But every time they fought those guys, they took the gi off to fight them, right? Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, whatever you're training in, whatever you're creating habits. Every single time you do something, you're creating habits. Mm-hmm. So if 50% even, and the gi guys train more than 50% gi, but even if 50% of the time you're holding my sleeve and my lapel and my pants, and then you go to train with me without it, that stuff's not there anymore. So there you are, basically like the passing the guard with the hand on the bicep thing. You now have to switch over to something else. So right away, my opinion when I first took it off was, how can you get to the 10,000 hour rule if you're doing it 2 different ways? So I wanted all no gi. I wanted to drill and drill and drill and drill and drill one way. And if I could be tight, if I could find handles and be tight without the gi on, how much tighter would it be if I put the gi on, right? Then it would be tighter. But if you train in the gi all the time, and you had the handles and you had the sleeves and you had all those things that made it tight, and now we took the gi off, you just lost everything that was creating your friction and your tightness. And that's why when you saw Eddie's guys trying to fight in the UFC and stuff, they were trying to wear leggings and knee sleeves and all that to create that tension, right? But my goal always was to create all that tension and that weight and that friction without that, with my grips and with my handles and with my positioning, and that's what I created and developed over that time. And so I think because that was what they came up doing forever, that was their moneymaker when they came here. The stripes cost now, the belt cost now, the gi is their moneymaker. You take off the gi, and it's a different ball game. Renzo was at my grand opening, and I've been friends with Renzo for probably, I guess like 20 something years. And he says, that's something about my gi classes. I said, I don't have gi classes. He goes, what? And he was like, yeah, I don't have gi classes. He goes, none, zero. And I said, no. And he goes, man, I do $9,000 a month in laundry for gis. And I said, look, I get it. I get that there's another market for money there, but my market from day one has been no gi. I haven't put a gi on since blue belt. I for a couple pictures I have, but that's all. Mm-hmm. And, so I get that I could make more money, but for me, it's not about that. It's about the principle of what I'm teaching, why I'm teaching it. If you want to compete in the gi, for sure you need to train in the gi, right? But we're not competing in the gi. We're competing in no gi. We're fighting, and we're doing jiu-jitsu now at a level where now, had I spent my whole career competing in no-gi jiu-jitsu matches only and not fighting, I'd have probably been a huge name in jiu-jitsu, right? But I spent my time fighting instead because that's what I really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then, I retired in 2013, and everyone's like, oh, you're going to start doing jiu-jitsu now? And I was like, oh, I don't know, we'll see. And then my kids were competing at a tournament in Houston, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it with you. So I went down there and I did it. And then 2 months later, I did another one. And then everyone's like, dude, you should do Worlds in November or December, whatever it was. And I was like, oh my God, well, okay. So I went down there and I hadn't trained until that year with a lot of high level guys, but I traveled around Texas at training at some gyms before I started competing. And I was handling everyone with my go-to stuff that I knew in my gym. I was having a harder time catching my blue belts with it than black belts at other places because they knew it, right? They knew what I was doing, but I got to new people that I hadn't trained with before, and I was just catching them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the New Breed tournament and I won. I went to the Austin Open and I won, tapped everyone. Went to Worlds in my first year, tap, through to the finals and won. And I was like, whoa. The next year I went to Pans in New York, tapped everybody there and won. Came back a week later, went to California, did Worlds again, won all the way through there again with submissions. The following year, Pans again. Then I went back to California again and tapped everybody except for the last guy who was very good, but beat him. And so I was just, how can you critique it? And it's not like I'm doing fancy rubber guard stuff. It's not like I was tapping everyone with leg locks. I was beating him straight up with guard passing kimuras and guillotines. And, that was my bread and butter. And so it kind of shut a few people up. The highlight was my first year at Worlds. In the finals, I won with a flying armbar and like a jumping flying armbar. And as soon as I stood up, Eddie and like 7 other dudes that were pretty good name guys were literally standing right there watching. And that couldn't have been more satisfying. I didn't ever have to compete again after that.
Got to be happy with that. Got to be happy.
Yeah, I was happy.
And so then one thing you did mention there was, the power of creating habits and how intentionally or unintentionally you end up creating habits no matter what you're doing. And I guess then you talked about creating your own training partners to train with out of your students and building up their habits.
Right.
I just want to just ask then, how were you approaching that to train up those training partners? And then maybe has that changed over time?
For sure. So I was doing it because number one, no one was letting me come to their gym because of my rebel to the black or to the no gi or to the gi. So I had a handful of guys who were my very good friends, and I just started teaching them, and my gym was small at the time, my garage was small at the time, and just started giving them the good stuff, man, and rolling with them nonstop. Like I have a video of me and Jeremy Williams, who was my first black belt, and there's a camera or there's a clock in the background, and it starts at midnight. And at 2:30 a.m. we start rolling, or we end rolling. We roll for 2.5 hours, starting at midnight at my gym. We're just there rolling, and that's what I mean. Like we just trained so much, and to start out, I was way better than them, and it just helped them elevate a lot faster. It pushed me a little bit, but that's also where in my career it hindered me. Right, I didn't go away to other camps with higher level guys to train with. I was always the best guy in my camp. And unless like I had Pete Spratt as a striking coach, and that was awesome. But as far as jiu-jitsu and everything went, I was the best guy. So it would take 2 or 3 times, 4 times through a round robin of all my guys before I started getting beat, before I started getting, dead. And so it wasn't as effective as it should have been. But at the same time, I couldn't afford to go away. I had a gym, I had a wife and kids. It just didn't work out that way. But that is also why I bring people in for Lucas, and I take him to train with people. So he's not that best guy in the room, and it's not comfortable. We didn't do it for a while. So when I first started doing it, he didn't want to do it. I was like, why? And I was like, well, I can tell you why. Like being the best guy in here, you're going to come across a guy who starts to put it on you in the cage, and you'll have never been there before, and that's not good. So. I've got him training with some really good guys, and he's on. I can tell you this: he's on the highest level right now with the best guys.
Yeah, and he's doing quite well in Bellator at the moment. That's something I want to ask you about now is how, like, especially with creating habits, and especially with jiu-jitsu habits translating over into MMA.
Right.
It seems like a lot has changed in the last 10, 15 years at least, of just with even submissions from people in the guard just not happening very often.
Of course.
How do you then look at training jiu-jitsu for MMA in this day and age?
So fortunately, I didn't wrestle. And I started wrestling throughout my career when I had a couple losses to Pat Miletich by decision because he out-wrestled me. My kids started wrestling, in the beginning of high school. They both have very good wrestling, and that is, in my opinion, the key to MMA. Whether you want to be a striker or a jiu-jitsu guy, you need to know how to wrestle, and they both can wrestle. If they're put on their back, like if Lucas gets put on his back, he'll get, depending on, let's say it happens in a fight, we got a plan, but let's say it happens in a fight and there is 2 or 3 minutes left in the round. He's got 30 seconds to try and submit him. If he can't, it's time to get up, time to get on top. He's super dangerous on his back. He gives me so many problems from his back, but I know it's MMA. I know it's very difficult. So getting up and sweeping or getting up, getting the back, whatever is important. So, if there's 30 seconds left, it's get up. If there's a minute left, it's get up. But if there's 2.5 minutes left, I'm gonna give him 30 seconds to try and set up a submission. Otherwise, after that, it's time to get up, because in MMA, if you're on your back, you're losing, unless you're throwing up multiple close subs and being very active, and he's not, then he could probably win a little bit, but otherwise you're losing in the judge's eyes being on bottom. So as good as his jiu-jitsu is on his back, the goal will be to get up if he ends up there.
Yeah.
And, there's lots of ways to get up. However, he would get up to get back on top, not really to get back to the feet, unless he just end up on the ground with a monster, that was a surprise to us or something. But if you watch MMA now, MMA is the same fight. Every single fight is the same fight. And it is a 2 guys striking really well. Some guys strike really well, some guys don't. Somebody gets a takedown, the other guy gets back up. No one's really working to submit anybody. So that's why you're not seeing a lot of submissions. But at the same time, there's only a handful of high-level jiu-jitsu guys, in MMA, in my opinion. And if you watch the jiu-jitsu in general, and I'm not pointing anybody out, because there are Jacare, Damian Maia, Joe Lozon, there's a handful of Jim Miller. There's some really good guys. Cerrone's even underestimated on the ground. But for the most part, the jiu-jitsu sucks in MMA. It's people don't train it. I think you have to have a specialty, and then get everything else as good as you can. And if wrestling is your specialty, or jiu-jitsu is your specialty, that is going to shine, because as a striker, as a grappler, for example, you got 3 or 4 feet to worry about to close that distance. And then if you're light years ahead of him on the ground, that's it for him. You see guys that cannot get up, and they cannot get up when they have a good guy on top of them. And so they have, everything to worry about after that. So, my goal with him is to change the game back a little bit to how it was, but at a much, much higher level. Like I can't even explain to you his jiu-jitsu in MMA. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his fights, but his jiu-jitsu and wrestling combo in MMA is now making his striking better, because people worry about the takedown. So he's landing good strikes, then getting the takedown. But he is just a grinder, tons of strikes, tons of elbows, nonstop passing, knee riding, passing, hovering. And it's just really hard to put him in a bad position. And we train it like that. We train it, if he's going to lose a position, it's going to be to the next best position. He's going to be right back to the other one again. Putting him on his back is going to be really, really difficult. Keeping him there would be even, more difficult. So I want to continue to see him use a lot of jiu-jitsu and, maybe get some more people that end up falling back that route. Otherwise, MMA is for sure its own style now, right? Like it is guys training jiu-jitsu, kickboxing and boxing and wrestling all at the same time and mastering nothing. So they're good everywhere, but they're not great anywhere. So if someone is great somewhere and you're able to take them there, you're going to beat them there. And he is a good wrestler. He's great at jiu-jitsu, and his striking is like, I don't like to keep talking about his striking because I want to surprise somebody, because he is going to get a knockout. I just don't want him to fall in love with a knockout when he gets it. When he gets a knockout, we're going to go backstage and shoot doubles.
I hear you.
Well, just because, man, you get guys like George Rogel, even Damian for a while, like those guys fall in love with their striking, and wrestlers fall in love with their striking because they have power, but that's where you end up getting losses. And the goal with him, man, is to run, to 10-0, and then start challenging for the top 5 guys for the belt in Bellator, and get there without losses. Right? That's obviously the goal for everybody, but this is a realistic goal about how we're approaching it, not rushing it, and just, fighting smart. For a while, you're listening to the commentators say, "Oh, I want to see him do this. I want to see him do that." We don't give a shit what you want to see. Like, we want to win the fight, right?
Exactly.
The goal is to win. And he's very mentally strong and stays very patient. And, he's dedicated like literally nobody I've ever seen. He has a whiteboard in his bedroom the size of a 65-inch TV that looks like the algorithm in Good Will Hunting, but it's the breakdown of his fight camp. And he does it every camp. And it's just, he was a really smart kid before he started fighting. He wasn't a fighter, never been in a fight before. And just, taking a different approach to it. And it's difficult to beat. It's going to be difficult to beat.
And then, so when you started teaching him jiu-jitsu, had he already started wrestling, or where did that fall in line? And did you always teach jiu-jitsu in the mind of it's going to be MMA applicable?
Yeah. So I always taught jiu-jitsu fairly close to MMA. My passing is perfect for it. My anytime I'm on the bottom, there's not a lot of reaching under the leg. There's not a lot of stuff that leave you open to getting strike, to getting hit. So there was always that kind of MMA in the background, but legit jiu-jitsu, not what you would now call MMA jiu-jitsu for sure. It was definitely more, you could compete with it, or fight with it. And that's how mine was my whole career too.
Mm-hmm.
But my kids, Luke, for example, was just a quiet, sort of nerdy book, animals, art kid. And Tyler was racing motocross. He was real athletic. And they were about to go into 7th and 8th grade. And I said, I'm going to have you guys start training. I had just opened my gym in Texas. I said, I'm going to have you guys start training just for self-defense reasons, because both of them are super sweet kids. And had anybody ever picked on them, they would have never fought back. Like, for sure would not have fought back. So I started training them, and maybe a month, 2 months in, there was a tournament coming up, a Naga tournament, and Tyler wanted to do it, and Lucas was not interested at all. And so we went, and Tyler won. And on the way home, Luke said, when's the next tournament? And I said, I'm not sure. Why? He goes, I'll do it. So I was like, okay, cool. So, he had what would be probably a 50-50 first year of winning and losing. He was bigger than Tyler. He was competing against good kids. He's competing against kids who've been training way longer. And Tyler took to it like, Tyler has 9 jiu-jitsu losses out of 290 something wins. And he's redeemed, I think, all but like 2 of them, because we never saw those guys again. He was just a savage. And Luke had a good amount his first year. And then by the second year, he just worked so hard and wasn't athletic, and worked himself into being athletic. And by the third year, he won the kids world championships in California. And so did Tyler. And he just got better and better and better. And Luke didn't start wrestling until his freshman year in high school. And Tyler, as an 8th grader, got to show up to the high school practices sometimes and train with them, but he didn't get to actually wrestle till his freshman year. And so that was they didn't start till freshman year in high school, and just became, their work ethic was second to none. And their wrestling coach also, like we walked in to the orientation and the wrestling coach made eye contact with me and saw them and he goes, man, he goes, I heard you guys moved to Frisco, but we weren't sure what school you were going to go to. He goes, we're so excited, and so again, they were the hardest working guys in the room. And now Tyler's wrestling Division I, and his coach tells me he's the hardest working guy in the room. And it's just the work ethic we created while training jiu-jitsu and starting them in wrestling.
So it sounds like a pretty good combination and a good way of looking at things you've got there. And I guess when you're training them and training guys at your own gym, I wonder what the role then of kind of creativity is in your teaching process and training process, because I'm thinking for a guy to go out on their own, go against the grain, you probably would be more open to new ideas and experimentation and trying things like that in the training room. Would that be a fair assumption to make?
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to anything, but I also have a passing system, a kimura system, a guillotine system. I love leg locks as well. But I'm also like, I learned my leg locks from a Sambo guy. Mm-hmm. One of my students took a handful of privates from Gordon and from, I believe, Gary when they were here and showed me something. And when he showed me that, I was like, oh, awesome. And that night I hit it like 3 times on people. And from that point on, I use it, Lucas uses it and stuff like that. So I'm definitely open to learning anything and love to learn, but I've mastered what I do. I'm a one side, like I don't even drill both sides. I drill one side and I am 99% on every side or on like I'm a left arm kimura, mm-hmm. an arm bar guy. I'm a right leg outside heel hook, left leg inside heel hook. I pass to both sides. I guillotine with my left arm. Like everything's one side, and the other side is probably fucking like 40%. But the side I'm good at, I've put in like so many hours of so many drills of so many, doing it live as well so many times that, like I said, when I went to Worlds, I tapped everybody in all 3 tournaments with the same submission, give or take one guillotine, but all from the same position, my home base position. And it's just something that I've drilled so much that it's real hard to stop. If I can get to it, then typically I get to it. Mm. Yes, I'm open to, like, both of my kids were even more open than me. I don't know if it's because Luke's super artsy, but he's like mind completely open and does some crazy stuff. Watching him and Tyler roll together is like hurts my brain, because the different positions and stuff that they get into and stuff that they try and are able to recover from if it doesn't work. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, we everyone's pretty open. Yeah,
and I guess even just being able to learn those things from other people and students and having them work on things as well would, if you go back to what you're describing at the Gracie Academy, is kind of like possibly the exact opposite, right?
Yeah, for sure the opposite. I mean, if I tried to walk in the gym and say, hey, boys, I saw this, check this out, let me show you, you'd probably laugh at me.
And also then, you mentioned the benefit of competition in being able to go out and test yourself against other people and using that as kind of the testing ground to get new ideas and bring new things back in to change habits. Now, there's a particular competition that I have to ask you about, which is the 2001 Westside Submission Grappling Tournament. When Genki Sudo came to town. Now, there's a video online that I must have watched about 1,000 or more times of Genki Sudo. Yeah, the highlight video. If you've got the full thing, I'd love to see it. It has to be one of my favorites of all time. It's one of those ones that I'd show people, hey, this is how cool this can be. You were the referee in that tournament. In the video, obviously it was at your place.
Right.
Can you describe just what's the backstory there? What happened? What went down that day?
So I used to hold a tournament in my gym, West Side Submission Tournament, and I would hold it every few months. We'd give away either free pizza and drinks, or I'd get like a 10-foot Subway sandwich and cut it and give away free food to the competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And man, we had Roy Nelson, we had Herb Dean, we had Dean Lister. I had a lot of really good guys, Romy Aram, Javi Vasquez, like really good guys come in and do the tournament. Unfortunately, a lot of times they weren't there at the same time. They weren't there at the same tournament. That day, Genki walked in, and I didn't know who he was at the time. And he had a couple of guys with him. I think some sort of publicity guy or journalist guy or something. I don't know. But I don't even know why he was in the U.S. and why he was at my gym, or how he found out about it. I don't know. But he just walks in my gym in Lake Forest, California. And I was like, oh, this guy looks like he's going to be good. And flying triangle. And he went with my guy Bow first, and he flying triangles Bow. And he flying triangle the next three guys in a row. And I was like, shit, man, if we just saw those first three, you probably wouldn't have got flying triangle. You might have got beat by something else, but probably wouldn't have got flying triangle. And so he hits those. Then he's dancing around one kid's guard and hops over his guard to a mounted triangle.
Yeah.
And then hits that rolling calf crusher. And you can see me in the video just laughing when he hit that calf crusher. I was like, oh my God, that was crazy. But he had 7 matches and just ran through 7 guys. Then he's tired, sits down. Javi Vasquez walks in the door, and he was going to do the absolute. And I was like, oh man, I then went, I offered $500 to the winner of both of them. Back then, that was a lot of money in a jiu-jitsu match. Yeah. And I said to Genki, and he goes, no, he was tired. He was exhausted. He didn't want to go, and Javi was fresh. And I got that. I was like, oh, okay, hopefully you come back another time. And so that match didn't get to happen. It would have been pretty exciting because Javier was very good, and would have definitely been the highest level guy that day that Genki would have gone against. But how cool just to have that video of him showing up, super nice guy, smoked everybody, and then just grabbed his piece of pizza and left. It was mind blowing.
That is incredible, and I mean, it matches kind of what I picked up, what I thought was going on, which is like, why is Genki Sudo here? And I
was thinking the same thing you were.
And what is going on? Like, he's just, because he is such a creative grappler himself that it's just
amazing.
It's just incredible to watch. But it just did seem like, it's like, what is going on? So did you ever see him again after that day in America?
Until I was in Japan. I saw him in Japan, but I never saw him in America again. I don't know what he was doing there. The cool thing about him was not only is he creative, he wasn't afraid to go for it, right? Like, I'm creative, but all my stuff has like a 99% exit strategy where I'm right back to a good spot. He was just throwing things, it was amazing to watch that day. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely jumped on a few training partners going for that flying triangle over the seated guard a few times after watching that video and failing spectacularly. But that's incredible. And so I guess also when you go with speaking over in Japan, I mean, taking your brand of no-gi jiu-jitsu, going over into Pride, Shudo, and things over there. Was there any considerations for your jiu-jitsu, like any of those criticisms of no-gi? Did you experience that over there, or was it just all, forgotten and left behind in America?
No criticism at all over there. It was, they were all very cool. My first, did I go to Pride first? I don't know if I went to Pride with Rampage first when he fought Sakuraba, or if I fought Gomi first, I forget. But my first trip for me fighting was Gomi. And, I hit some really nice submissions, really nice takedowns, really nice, he hadn't been taken down in a fight yet. And I took him down 4 times. Had a couple Kimuras locked up. Like, that was early on in my Kimura, game, attack system, whatever. And and I had him in so many things. You know, they loved it. It was a very high paced fight, close decision. And then my first fight in Pride, I hit 2 subs on the same guy. You know, I armbarred him.
I wanted to talk to you about that.
The second half of that fight was so much more exciting. I was mad at the time, but I'm glad it happened now because it actually worked. I got to work my home base position, which I just started then, which is where I kill everyone from now. But, you know, that was a whole dramatic scene, but I got to show some fancy jiu-jitsu there as well. So that was kind of cool. Rolling kimura from the single leg.
Yeah, and so that was EIG. I'll probably butcher the pronunciation.
Eiji Mitsuoka.
You got it. And tapped him with an armbar, and then it was confusion where the ref hops up, says he didn't tap, and you guys, after a break, you guys have to go again. What was going on there? Is it, you know, one of those Japanese you know, refereeing kind of stories that you might hear, or
it started long before that.
Yeah.
So let me go back to a short time before that. I was supposed to fight Joe Stevenson in the UFC right after he won the Ultimate Fighter. And they asked me to fight him. And I had wanted to fight him, but they had come to me offering me $3,000 to show, $3,000 to win. And I had just a couple years earlier beat him handily in less than 2 minutes. And I was like, man, I'm not going to fight for 3-3. You know, it's not worth it to me. And then I asked what he was getting. He was getting 10-10. And I was like, no, you know, no way. And like, oh, he's the winner of the show. He wants you to be his first fight in the UFC. I'm like, I'm not doing it for 3-3. And at the time, I needed money, but I didn't need it like that, you know. And so it wasn't a big deal to me. And they offered me. They came back and offered me 4-4, and Joe kind of started talking trash like he did the first time, and that's what got him put to sleep the first time. And so I ended up saying yes, and they said, okay, we'll send a contract over. Well, 30 days later, they actually, I didn't even hear from them. 30 days later, the Gracies hit me up to fight in the Gracie Fighting Championships, and they were offering me $20,000 flat. And it was 36 days before the UFC. And I said, yes, I'll take that fight. And so I take that fight. Joe Silva calls me and says, hey, what are you doing? You can't take that fight. And I said, why? And he goes, your contract, blah, blah. I said, I never got a contract. He goes, we never got our contract back. I said, because you never sent me a contract. And we got in a big argument. And so long story short, they tell me I can't take the other fight. I said, you're going to have to pay me more than 4-4 if you don't want me to take that fight. They're paying me $20,000. I need $20,000, you know? And so I said no. And the next day, Dana calls me and he says, Chris, drop out of that fight. You can't take that fight. And I said, listen, Dana, you guys are paying me shit money. And they're paying me good money. I need the fight. We'll put you on the poster, blah, blah, blah. I said, it doesn't matter, whatever. And he says, listen, drop out of that fight or you're banned from the UFC for life. I was like, what?
Gee.
And so he had, at that point, they had given me tickets to the UFC a couple times when I was in town in Vegas. And that weekend was my anniversary. So my wife and I are in Vegas, and I said, I'll tell you what, give me tickets to the fights this weekend and I'll do it. He goes, I can't really. And I hung up the phone. And that was the end of it. So I leave to go to Big Bear to get ready for the fight that the Gracies had offered me. And the next day on the Underground Forum, Dana White posts, Chris Brennan's a fucking pussy.
Jeez.
Yeah. And by the time I got to it, it was 20 pages long.
Oh, no.
Of people, but everyone was bashing Dana. You're the CEO of this company.
Yeah.
How are you going to talk like this about one of your guys? Blah, blah, blah. And just, everyone was, for the most part, everyone was ripping him. A couple people call me a pussy probably, but whatever. So I'm dying. I'm like, oh my gosh, So I get through my fight and I win. I go to the UFC, another UFC, to watch.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm there, I'm walking through the pool area at Mandalay, and I hear Chris Brennan. And I look back, and it's Yukino Kondo from Pride. Well, I end up verbally agreeing to my Pride contract at the UFC, so it couldn't have gotten any better than that. And so I tell them yes, that I would like to fight for them. And they said, okay, we'll get back to you. I go home, and that is on Sunday. On Monday, they call me and said, hey, do you want to fight in our next show? And I said, yeah, when is it? Like Monday. I was like, well, it was on a Monday. I don't know why. And I was like, what? So I have 2 days of training, and then I'm on a flight to Japan and not in shape. I wasn't ready to fight. And I show up, and the weight class was 183 pounds. That's what the middleweight was at that time. There was no 161 weight class yet in Pride. Mm-hmm. And so I show up, I make my cut, I get to 183, I weigh in, and they come to me and they said, hey, he's a little bit smaller. I'm going to need you to lose a couple more pounds. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, what do you need? So I said 181. So I went and I cut 2 more pounds. I make 181. And they tell me again, we need you to make 180 pounds. You need to lose another pound. And I'm like, man, I wasn't in shape. It's already hard cutting this. So I go and I cut that pound. I come back again in the third time. They're like, hey, he's 76. I need you to make 79. If you make 79, they'll take the fight. And I'm like, what do you mean they'll take the fight? Like, you guys offered me this fight because of him. And my brother says, listen, if you want him to lose that next pound, we're going to need some sort of compensation from you. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, okay. Do you want Chris to win the fight? and me and my brother looked at each other like, what? And I was like, no, like, we'll take care of that. And that's how I ended up signing a 4-fight deal with Pride.
Wow.
So I walked away and I'm elbowing him. I'm like, dude, I knew that shit happened over here. and I was tripping out so hard. And now I'm like, man, they're just gonna screw me. I really gotta get in and get out. I gotta get this done. Can't let it go to the judges. So I go in and I armbar this guy. He screams, taps, and the ref grabs me all at the same time. So I let go. I stand and walk away. I turn around and they're saying he didn't tap. I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is how they're going to do it. And I'm not in shape. I had fought for a minute and a half. I was already tired. And I was like, and then fortunately they took like a 5 or 6 minute break while all the referees were discussing it. And they came back, you're going to fight again. I was like, oh my gosh. So then I thought for sure I wasn't going to win. At that point, I'm like, no matter what I do, they're not going to let this happen. So I ended up breaking his shoulder on the same side. I hit him with the whole takedown, single leg to the kimura, to the roll. All of it was just so perfect. And it was flashy. It was fancy. It didn't even mean to be, but it just was. And I hit him with a great kimura at the end and literally tore his shoulder. And then I leaned into him and I said, you should have admitted you tapped the first time. And I walked off. And, then I was irritated and I wanted to talk trash when they interviewed me, but I calmed down by that time. I was like, no, it's my fault. I shouldn't have let go. I should have waited for the referee, even though I did wait. The referee did break us up. And I just kind of took the blame for it and moved on because I knew I wanted to come back and fight some more and whatnot. So that was a crazy, crazy, crazy night, man.
Yeah, that whole thing's it's like a scene from a movie or something, right? The backstage,
I wish I had that all on video. It would have been fantastic.
Oh, it's amazing. And I guess just focusing then on your use of kimuras, because you are known as, or at least the instructional, the king of the kimuras,
sure.
King of kimuras, and it's obviously like it really kind of got a bump in people's minds from the, like, now people call it the kimura trap and things like that. Danaher's obviously very heavy on the kimuras. What's your thoughts on that? Always, you must be like, yeah, I knew so all along, right?
Oh, for sure. It's a grip that you can submit people with. You can turn in arm bars. You can take the back. You can sweep. You can do so much with it. And in a no-gi situation, it's a good grip 5th round sweaty, right? Like it's going to be your best go-to to control an arm. And I have a grip when I grab it, it puts a bicep slicer feeling on your arm the entire time. And I get guys tapping early to stuff that I'm doing just because the grip stays on so tight. But yeah, it's always been, all the way back in the end of 99 to 2000, I was doing it all the time. 2001, I hit it. I don't know what year I fought Gomi in, but I was just at that point in time, I was hitting it on everybody in training, and I had it on Gomi. I didn't finish it, but I was literally, that was my point of my career, was the development of my style, my game, and I got better trying it on the best guys, and then trying in the gym and getting better and trial and error. And what did I do wrong in the fight? And I made a huge mistake in the Gomi fight that I would, I pet peeve it when I'm teaching now. On this one sweep, but it ended up with him in side control on me on this roll because my knee wasn't on his belly, but it was the tiniest thing that made a giant difference in the position right at that point. So it's something that I've spent, if a guy spent a couple years getting good at something, it's something I spent 15 years getting good at. I spent 15 years or more working the kimura, working the guillotine into the kimura, because they both play right next to each other. If I miss one, the other's there. And then adding legs, and in the last 5 years, I've just been passing. Just, I love my knee slice and float passes and some of the stuff that Gordon's doing now. But even the stuff that he does, if Gordon was under Gordon and he tried to pass that way, he'd leg lock him. Okay. And my stuff, my leg staple and everything, the way I do it is always been leg safe, even before legs became a thing. So I didn't have to make a lot of adjustments in the last 4 or 5 years when legs became really big to my passing system to not get leg locked.
And then you mentioned then the kimura as the grip. Do you think that was your early adoption of no-gi that kind of led you down that path, or was it already something?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
No, it was, what happened was, so one day at the Gracie Academy, and I knew I already didn't want to train gi, didn't want to compete in the gi. But one day in the Gracie Academy, there were a couple guys that were in the gi that were better than me, a couple purple belts and a couple brown belts. And at the time I was blue and had, I don't know, two stripes, and they could beat me in the gi. I could give everyone a hard match, but they could beat me in the gi. One day Hoist came down, said, everybody take off your gi tops. We're going to go open hand strikes and go live. I just beat the shit out of everybody. But not just striking them. My jiu-jitsu was just naturally really good without the gi on. I had my sweeps, I had my takedowns, my guard passing, like all of it just naturally came to me that day. And man, I went and sat back down. I was like, holy crap. I was like, that is, and I'd been doing no-gi on the side. Me and Layman in the hotel room, we had guys like Muzio DeAngelis, Lil H, who fights in Bellator and was an LFA. A lot of really good guys from Brazil. Mauricio Zangano was like one of my best friends, and he would train in our hotel room with us all the time. But we always trained no-gi. So when it came time to do it with those guys, they had barely done any, and that's what I'd been spending my time trying to do the most. And it just really showed. And at that point, I was like, yep, that's the end of the gi for me. I'm done with this shit.
And then I guess just to wrap things up, with hindsight now, looking back at that moment, deciding to go no-gi, probably, being, kind of outcast from the mainstream Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu scene at the time. And then now, Gordon Ryan just the other day saying on Joe Rogan's show that he thinks, no-gi is obviously going to be the only thing that people are going to be watching people competing in the future. What kind of, advice would you give yourself, or what kind of lessons would you take back from that whole journey? Well,
here's an example of how serious I was about it. The Roger Brooking guy, my friend who I brought from Brazil, he was a brown belt in gi. He was going to open my gym with me. He was going to partner with me. He was going to be the jiu-jitsu coach, to start with. And as soon as I told him it was going to be no-gi, he didn't want any part of it. And I was like, man, this is what I want to do. Come on, and I'm putting the money up. I'm doing all this. and he just did not want to do it. And he was, for himself at the time, he was probably right, because he would have never gotten his black belt, not for a long time anyway. He would have got black belt too. But so I get what why he didn't do it. He had trained all the way through brown belt as it was, and whatever. But I was so early on that I just knew next generation, it's perfect now because of my kids. They're obviously the next generation. But my goal at the time was next generation was going to be the next generation of jiu-jitsu, and they said that when I was fighting in the UFC that night against Pat Miletich. They're like, he's going to open up a school called the Next Generation. He wants to create the next generation of Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have the next generation of jiu-jitsu and be no-gi, and that be no-gi. And so that was why I named my gym what I named it. It just so happens to be now that, my kids actually are the next generation. And so it works again. But originally, I was going no-gi no matter what, I was a blue belt. And when he said he wasn't going to be involved, I'm like, well, I guess I'm opening a gym as a blue belt.
And so I guess it was just that firm belief within yourself, looking at what you wanted to do in fighting and just staying true to that path. And I mean, even as you mentioned earlier, Henzo saying he was doing $9,000 worth of gi laundry a month. You even, am I correct in you even went the route of starting the first no-gi brand with no-gi? Is that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. A buddy of mine, Jeremy, we started that clothing company. Dan, I don't know if you've ever heard of Hitman Fight Gear, but Hitman Fight Gear used to sponsor me. And I told him I wanted to start a clothing company, but I wanted to be more sporty, not as black and skulls and everything as Hitman was. And he had just gotten 300 pair of blue shorts that were really cool, but they were blue, and it didn't vibe with his thing. So I spent, I think, $1,200, bought those shorts, and then just started no-gi. From then I got my buddy Jeremy, who's an artist, and he started creating logos, and then we just grew it from there. And then later sold it to Budo Videos down the line.
Incredible. So many, you really were starting that next generation, kind of even ahead of the curve, really, in a lot of what you were doing in grappling, and now passing that on to your kids. Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, I didn't come when I first started. I wasn't coming from a really good place. I had nothing, I didn't have money. So I'm glad that I had to do it the way I did it, and grind and work hard and fail, because it helped develop me as a person. I dropped out of high school as a freshman in high school and didn't go back, so it really helped me develop into a person and into a businessman and into, a hard worker. And so the downs for me was always, I was never deterred. I was never thought I wasn't going to make it, no matter how many times it didn't work. I never thought I wasn't going to make it. So it just helped me stay determined to get to where I'm at. And now, my kids have it almost too easy, for sure. They've never done without. And that was a hard thing for me when Luke decided he was going to fight, was like, okay, we're going to turn everything up in training and see how that goes. Cause he had never been in a fight before. He had never been, he was a sweet kid, never been in an argument before. And he just is so good at the sport. And like his second opponent was a shit talker, and he was kind of mad dogging him and wouldn't shake his hand at the press conference and was just being a dick. And he had never dealt with that even in real life. And I'm like, hey, I said, just laugh. Like whatever he does, don't even worry about it, because tomorrow he still has to fight you, so even though he's acting stupid, he still has to fight you. It's not going to help him fight you any better. And now, he's older, he's 20, he's almost 21. He's different. He's definitely got a mean way about him now in the cage. But, I was curious at the beginning. I was like, okay, you want to fight? You're fighting from a very, very different place than I was fighting from, for sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. In where I'm from, we kind of have a saying that someone's got to get a bit of mongrel in them. It's like they got to switch on, turn that, have that little bit of fight in them, and you can kind of tell.
Does.
Yeah. Chris, it's been an amazing interview for me to have the opportunity to have this conversation because, it's just such a rich history that you've got in the sport that just been a pleasure to chat with you about. I'm wondering if people want to get in touch with you, want to get in contact, anything like that. Is there a way they should go about it, or anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, I mean, they can. I'm on Facebook. My Facebook's full, but they can follow me or go to my athlete page and follow it. Instagram, it's Chris, 3-time champ. Chris Brennan, 3-time champ. It's anybody can. I'm super accessible. If someone wanted to message me, question me, whatever, feel free to hit me up at any time. And otherwise, Next Generation MMA is my gym. I've got 2 here in Texas, 1 in Colorado, 1 in California, 2 in Ireland, 2 in England, 2 in Norway, and 1 in Australia.
That's from humble beginnings, going worldwide.
Yes, sir. Been lucky, been fortunate.
Well, I'm fortunate to have had this chance to speak to you today, Chris. Really appreciate it. And hopefully,
thank you very much. I appreciate the interview.
Do it again in the future sometime.
Sure, anytime.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Until next time, you can visit sonnybrown.net to find out more ways to break it down.